Welcome to Coworking Values, the podcast of the European Coworking Assembly. Each week we deep dive into one of the values of accessibility, community, openness, collaboration and sustainability. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the possibly the most special episode of the Coworking Values podcast ever. And I've got the Iris Kavanagh on the phone from Santa Cruz. Is that right?
Yes, Santa Cruz, California.
It didn't sound so cool. So Iris, what are you known for, and what would you like to be known for?
What am I known for? I guess I am probably known for my hiring skills in coworking, and probably my history with McSpace and kind of going back to somewhat of the beginning of the coworking movement. What I'd like to be known for, honestly, is making people feel comfortable and having, really comfortable and open conversations and sharing of ideas.
I think you make people feel very comfortable. So Iris and I are in Kat Johnson's content sprint group. Kat Johnson's the other person who does content marketing in the world, and you bring a really genuinely open flavor to that group. And so how do you think you do that?
Really, but just by being myself. I think I made a commitment to myself about 5 years ago that moving forward in my life, I was at sort of a crossroads, and moving forward in my life, I was going to be 100% me. I was going to bring my full self to the table for the first time in my life. And there's various different aspects of myself. And so I try to really live that. And I think that's probably why I'm not afraid to be vulnerable, I guess. Or maybe I am afraid to be vulnerable, but I do it anyway.
That's total Brené Brown. So with what you just said, I'm going to couple that to the, because I can't find a good way to link it. It's like, we're going to talk about the co-working values today. And one of the reasons I want to chew the fat over that with you is I feel you're one of the people in the world that is wildly deeply committed to them, but also has a business head on them. So my first question would be where did your business head evolve from?
Well, I'd say that the business head part of me has probably been the slowest to evolve, or I should say the slowest to grow. But I think with respect to coworking, I was introduced to coworking through a company that was doing coworking from a business model perspective. And so I saw pretty early on the importance of having, in coworking we talk about sustainability, but we don't always talk about sustainability from a kind of business bottom line perspective. And so I think it was pretty easy for me to see that it was important to have a sound business practice behind coworking if you want to be able to keep your doors open and keep, the experience for your members a consistent one with respect to consistent internet, consistent environment, and and not being evicted, I guess, as it were. And I understood. There was a lot of, I think back in the early days, there was a lot of tension around business model versus cooperative model. And I really did understand that tension, having grown up in the cooperative movement of businesses. And I believe strongly in cooperative run businesses. And also at the end of the day, when it comes to humans, there does need to be a decision maker often in a situation. And sometimes, systems can be set up so well that a consensus-based decision is one that can be arrived at. But oftentimes, as communities come and go and have flux, the original principles, unfortunately, can get lost along the way, so that you do end up in a situation where you do have to have a decision maker. And that decision maker is often the person who is able to keep the business in mind, and hopefully, in the case of co-working, also keep the community in mind, because it is, I believe that the sustainability of the model around co-working is that constant dance, that constant balance on the fence of community and business. And what's good for one is definitely good for the other in co-working, but sometimes you can push the balance a little too far in either direction.
And what, because that word community gets flogged to death, and I've been in several spaces where the community's been, like amazing, and that's the main reason to show up, because the desk is like rubbish, but the community's great. But you couldn't, they're the spaces I've done best. But how, I'm trying to say this without sounding like a crack record. Like like you said earlier, there's this forever, this everlasting tension of around the world community, and I always feel, and just correct me if you don't like it, is the more real estatey places want community and have money, and the more community spaces want the money but have community, and it's very hard to get that, like you said, balance in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that with community is a buzzword that you hear it everywhere, right? You hear community in all forms or all sectors of business these days, or many forms and sectors. And I think for me, at the base level, a community is really about relationships, and it's really about one relationship at a time, and the kind of nexus of all of those individual relationships come together, and then you have a relationship to that community. So if you are not able to put relationships in the forefront of your business model, and the way that you make your decisions is not based on those, the stakeholders within that relationship, then it becomes much more difficult to have community be sort of your true experience that you're offering in your space.
So it sounds like, if you have, like, trust is the main thing in business, which people accidentally sacrifice for the sale sometimes. And I think more than ever, like, it's the relationships are really important. But if you try and like fast track your community, you end up just being a transaction, even though you're all in the same building together. And that's so. What I'm trying to say very badly is that it's like the maturity of understanding how to run a business will give you that relationship, trust, secret sauce thing. Does that sound right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that can be so difficult if you start your space off without having, any type of community to begin with. I'm not saying that, you can't develop a community, but if your goal is to develop a sustainable business, meaning that you're meeting your benchmarks in terms of your financial gains, it can be difficult to serve, so to speak, both masters, the money and the desire to build an authentic community. So, I don't think you can say enough good things about building those relationships from the very, very beginning. Hopefully you have them before you even decide you want to open a co-working space. But if you don't, and you're listening to this right now, and you're working on your spreadsheets, and you're looking at furniture, and you're touring buildings, don't forget to also start finding your people, because it's you and it's your people who are going to fill that space in the beginning. And it's people filling the space that draw more people into the space. And if you're left, if you leave your what we would call marketing in co-working, which is really relationship building, to the last minute or to your grand opening, you are going to be faced with a decision down the line. If you have to meet certain financial benchmarks to stay open, where somebody raises a red flag, and you're going to have decide, do I take a hit, a financial hit, or do I have this person in the space? And more often than not, if a person raises a red flag on a tour or when you first meet them, the problem is only going to get worse in a community setting. And it's much better to understand, your gut and hear your gut and listen to it about that person potentially not being the right fit than it is to take a chance on that and have them infiltrate your community in a really negative way. And I think that's where in co-working, the maturity kind of comes in, is understanding that it really is a marathon. When you're building a business based on impact, whether it be impact on one person's lives or impact on 200 persons' lives or the lives of a whole district of your city, that is a long game. It's not, there's not a quick win scenario in that situation.
So that's like community and sustainability, and I'm going to continue that thread you just left off with. So where's can you riff on like the openness and the accessibility and collaboration bit, like whichever one grabs you first?
Yeah, well, accessibility grabs me first for a couple of reasons. I love to I live in a smaller town, not a small town, but a smaller city in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I live in a pretty walkable city or bikeable city. So my co-working space is very accessible to my community. I can bike there, I can walk there. Of course I can drive and park there. And so I love that. In the 10 and a half years that I've been going there, there have been many ways that I've accessed that space. And many ways that I've accessed the route, including being driven on crutches, which was probably my least favorite way. But so I think of accessibility in that way. I also think of accessibility in terms of the neighborhood itself. What's accessible near my co-working space? And living in a small town or a smallish city, we're lucky in that our co-working space can be located in the downtown corridor and still have this neighborhoodly feel around it. So what's accessible for us is shops and restaurants and movie theaters and a couple of pubs or places to have a drink with friends after work. The post office, local running paths, soccer fields, bike paths. So we have an opportunity to have our co-working space be almost like a community center, like a hub. And oftentimes I will be downtown on the weekend with my kids and we'll need a restroom to use, a clean restroom. And so we'll just duck into next space to use the facilities because I know that they're clean and they're warm and, the kids can hang out while somebody uses the bathroom. And I will often see other families in there doing the same thing. Or, somebody comes in for a lunch date and they decide to show their parents who are visiting in town or whatever, their office space. And I love how accessible that feels. It feels like it's more than just your typical office, right? I don't know how many people are so excited about their office space, in a kind of more traditional office that they will show people on the weekends what it's like who are visiting from out of town. And then finally, I think it's important also to look at accessibility, of course, from the physical accessibility. How accessible is the furniture? How easy is it for the humans to determine what use they're going to put that furniture to that day? I really like to set a design up so that it can be moved and used by the humans in the way that the humans in the room at the time feel is the best or meets their needs at the moment. And I think having the space be accessible in that way is important. It's also important that your space be accessible to multiple different communities. And if you, at least to me, in a community-based space, I want to know that, that there's opportunities for different people, for the well employed and or high earning consultant or startup team well-funded startup team, who can afford a really high-end office in a co-working space. And also, maybe the woman in her kitchen who's starting out her kitchen-based business, maybe she makes tamales and she sells those to her neighbors and at the local farmer's market. But, what would make that space accessible to her as well? And so I feel like that is a really important part of the accessibility conversation with respect to diversity and inclusion, and really making sure that our internal communities reflect our external communities.
That's a huge thing. Can you say, I've been trying to get this in all along, can you say a little bit about women who co-work? Because I've tried to get men who co-work going, but it hasn't really got the traction that your women who co-work group has got. How do you do that?
We're rooting for you, Bernie. We would love to see a men who co-work group that really supports the men of the movement. So Women Who Co-work was formed when my partner, Laura Shook Guzman, and I met. She had, for International Co-working Day in 2016, she was feeling lonely as a female operator and female founder. And she'd been doing it a long time. She's the first wellness space in the world, but also the first co-working space in Texas. And so she'd been doing it for a long time, but, she didn't necessarily know. She wanted to be able to reach out to other female founders who could understand, just from a female perspective, running a co-working business. And so she decided to go and reach out to them, and couldn't figure out where to find them. And so she went on, she was like, oh, well, then I'm going to write a blog article about the female founders of the movement, and I wonder where I can find them. So she went on to, a couple different of our repositories of information around co-working, and she checked out DeskMag's timeline, and there was no information out there about the female owners, even though, the movement has been largely female-led, with the people actually running the spaces. And so, and in fact, on DeskMag's timeline, the only female mentioned was Ashley Proctor and CoHIP, which is definitely something to mention, and a huge, amazing gift to the people of Canada, and hopefully eventually to the world. And at the same time, the term co-working was coined at a feminist collective in San Francisco. So it was just like this kind of juxtaposition to what women had represented in the movement. So she decided that, she wanted to write this blog post, and we met through the recruitment of information around female founders for that blog post. And I wanted to interview her for my podcast. I had been at the time really starting to understand that female entrepreneurs have different needs, and that there could be an effort towards assisting the female entrepreneurs of the co-working movement, just like there were efforts within co-working spaces in providing programming towards female entrepreneurs in general. And being a woman and having just gone through a pretty big transition in my life, where, I found myself transitioning from an employee of a co-working company to a consultant, and going through a lot of changes around that. I was looking at what my life was like in being a female, and the kind of needs that I had, and, being a mom, and the difference for me in what it took to make something happen than one of my my male counterparts that that had the support and the services of a family.
So, Iris, what are those?
Mm-hmm.
Just you need to spell it out for some people. Like, what are those differences? Because as you're talking, I'm thinking of the Nike athlete who. She's an American athlete, African American athlete, and she made this very cool video, which I will put in the show notes. And she said, if you're a male athlete, you get this, and if you're a female athlete, your sponsorship contract gets, stopped or terminated when you go and have a baby. And obviously, while you're pregnant, you can't be running. And probably we'll find out who it is for this. But there's a huge difference to how the world treats and occurs for, you know, women and men running businesses. And can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So, you know, the thing is, Bernie, as you and I both know, is that there's a lot of soft things. So there's some insidious things as well, but there's a lot of soft things, and it's hard to really pinpoint it. And that's unfortunately the problem with institutionalized inequality, is that because it's institutionalized, we don't even recognize that that there's something wrong with it until it really becomes apparent to us. But so some of the things are just in how we're raised as people, as human beings. Men are raised to take risks and encouraged to take risks, and it's biologically in a man's nature to take a risk. And women are, generally speaking, raised to be conservative, to be calculating, to think about what it is that we're doing and how it affects everyone around us, and be risk adverse, because being risky as a female means that you're risking the health of your family and the future of a generation or the future of a species. So just at the very kind of base level of the differences between what's offered to men and women, when it comes to being an entrepreneur, risk is a really important factor in whether or not you are successful as an entrepreneur. Being willing to take a risk, being willing to step out and do something without having a known and sure safety net, is a hallmark of all of the good entrepreneurs out there. In addition, you know, I'll just go out and say the world of business was built by men, and it was built for men. And masculine people operate from a very, you know, from one set of kind of values, or one set of, frankly, biological drives. And, you know, if you look into the research, the male brain and the female brain are wired differently. The male brain is wired to be much more monofocused. And there's obviously, we all know the biological reasons for that. And monofocus is how the business world was created. The female brain is wired to be much more connected. Our nerves, right in the center of our brain, our nerve bundle there is bigger, and it connects more parts of our brain. So our brain is less compartmentalized, which means that we see connections, which means that we're much more about relationships. And when you look at the world of business, you know, and sort of the old business tenets of leave home at home and business at the office, and don't mix the two, or, you know, don't allow your emotions to affect your business, and things like that. Those are ways that women or female people in the world operate differently. We operate from a space of emotions. And I'm not talking about negative versus positive emotions. I just mean from emotions. Our emotions do drive us, because, and frankly, they do all humans. We're chemical beings. But so we also operate from a relational standpoint. Women tend to think of the entire unit, the entire village, or the entire family structure when we make decisions. And if you're a single woman, that often translates to the people around you that are in your tighter inner circle. And so just from a decision-making perspective, the world of business was developed in a way that we don't necessarily feel comfortable being part of it. And so I'm going to go way down the rabbit hole here, but you know what the feminist movement did was it allowed us to step into the world of business. However, it required us to let go of our feminine principles in order to do so. We had to step into masculine principles, which, you know, each one of us carries the masculine and feminine within us at all times, and we operate from masculine and or feminine in any given moment, depending on what's more dominant within us. However, the world of business required, and women joining the world of business required that the majority of women step into their masculine and step out of the feminine. And so what we're doing with Women Who Co-work is really embracing the feminine, embracing the values that women bring to the table, which are of connectedness, of collaboration, of inclusivity, and of a sense of the whole being the important and not just the individual. So I love, Laura and I like to talk about, the 5 core values of coworking are actually really feminine values. And they're not the values that you typically see in the business world. So for us, we really feel excited that that Women Who Co-work is able to provide the women of the movement a place to say, hey, it's okay to be 100% yourself here as a female. If you're a mom and you're running a business and a family and you're trying to balance all of that, we get you. We're here for you. We see you and everything you're doing all day. If you're not, if that's not the world that you walk in, you're nonetheless a female in this world, and you have unique circumstances to overcome in the world of business. A lot of times in business, women don't feel like we can speak up in a room full of men because our ideas might be shot down as stupid or trivial, or our points might be seen as defensive. I recently attended a conference, and Lisa Wang, the founder and CEO of SheWorks, she's a former Wall Street investor as well as Olympic gold medalist, and she's now helping women get access to funding in the Valley, in Silicon Valley, which is where I live. And she threw out some facts, and unfortunately I didn't get the percentages completely, but she said 66% of the time that a woman is pitching her business to a panel of investors, she's asked preventative questions. And about 70% of the time, and that's the figure that I didn't get, but I believe that it was close to 70% of the time, a man is asked promotional questions. So what ends up happening is if the woman is asked a preventative question, then she has to talk about, like, how are you going to handle this threat in the business sector? What are you going to do about this company that's coming up doing the same thing you're going to do? So she has to answer in a defensive way. She has to provide a defensive answer. Whereas the man being asked promotional questions, he's able to provide a context or an answer, which is in a context of what he's going to do to grow bigger and how he's going to be moving forward in his business in a positive way. So he's seen as forward thinking. So if you think about that, just the way that women and men are asked questions determines how we're actually seen around our business and around our understanding of our business by society or by the people within that society that's asking us those questions.
So in like the data, how can we conduct ourselves day to day in a co-working space? Because what in that section there, there's a lot of things that just come up a lot for us nowadays. And, we have our inclusion diversity little project going on in the European Co-working Assembly, and there's the Facebook group. And one of the things that comes out is that, people, a lot of the communication around a co-working space is, nice white men programming computers. And when I ask people who don't know anything about co-working, they say, "What's that for?" And they all say, "Oh, it's for like startup kids like Mark Zuckerberg." That's the what's the word, like lazy world view of what's going on. But then, like, particularly in London, spaces are wildly diverse things. And one of my concerns, which is what I meant to start with, is that, when people don't see themselves in the communications and the website and, pictures and stuff, I would not, I'm a white guy, and I'd be very reluctant to go into one of those white male pizza eating programming startuping things, because I just don't feel like I fit there. I wouldn't feel comfortable there. No one would probably be nasty to me, but I would I'd feel out of place. And what can we do differently in our communication? Or our day-to-day is what I mean, not communication. Sorry, it sounded like I was asking you for a marketing strategy.
Yeah, this is such a big topic. I think that the most important thing to be is respectful. And so if you're talking to somebody and you you want to ask them a question, or you want to engage them in a conversation, the first measure of respect is just to make sure that they're open to that at the moment. We have the sort of heads down policy in co-working. If the headphones are on, that person isn't open to being talked to at that time. So just kind of those common basic courtesies, I think, are a good place to start. And then to build on that, is your question one that you would ask, if you're a male and you're asking a female a question, is that a question that you would ask another male about their business? Or is that a question that you would ask them about the activity that you're asking them about? Let's say you're both runners and you want to ask a question about runners. And if it's not, then is it one that you would ask your mom or your sister? And I don't mean to bring it back to that, but I do think it's important. There has to be a baseline. You sort of have to have a filter through which you filter your conversations. And my hope is that someday we don't need any of these filters, because someday, we will have healed this divide that we have between genders in our culture. However, we all recognize that this time right now in history is a time where things are in flux, and sort of the dust has been shaken. Not sure if that's the right term, the right use of that tense, but the carpet has been shaken and the dust is still settling. And with the Me Too movement and the Time's Up movement, and just in general, women saying, "Hey, this is happening to us, and this is a systemic issue, and we do need to handle it." During this time, we are all figuring things out together and rearranging things in a way that everybody has a seat at the table. So I think having having that check, that internal check for yourself is what I'm doing, coming from a place of respect. And if that is a yes, then the next level is personal space. And everybody has a different idea of what they appreciate as for personal space. And some people need more personal space than others. So if you're not sure, err on the side of more personal space is what I'd say. If you're somebody who, is a touchy-feely kind of person and you like to get up close to people, probably need to check that if you're working out of a co-working space until you really know all of the people in your space are comfortable with you.
So what's
in terms of terms of making spaces safe for everybody, I think it's important that community managers receive training on how to handle inappropriate actions between members. And that includes the community manager receiving training on how to handle an inappropriate action against them by a member, because we have this major gray area in terms of human resource law in co-working spaces. And so all employers should give their team members the opportunity and the right to defend themselves. And if there is, the codes of conduct that that the co-working world is working on and getting in place in our spaces should include a clause really that says that somebody will, that these are the expectations at all times. A violation of this expectation will result in immediate termination. And that a community manager is given both the autonomy and the empowerment to be able to speak up on their own behalf if something goes wrong, and know that there's a written policy in place that everybody's signed, that if something does go wrong, that person, that community manager is going to be protected in that situation.
There's I know about what you just said there, but obviously there's more nowadays, but there's a lot of places that that's been like a new idea for. There is still a bit of the kind of, Wild West, uncharted territory thing in co-working spaces, and a bit about, when you're in a shared workspace and something, particularly in a sort of sexual misconduct, inappropriate action thing happens, it's very unclear who is, the employer or the employee, or there's, I don't want to like deep dive on it now because we do it in another podcast somewhere, but that is something people have to be alert to. I want to like jump on quickly to collaboration, because I think we've like touched on a lot of collaborative points, but like when someone, in the context of it's a co-working value, what does collaboration mean for you, Iris?
I love collaboration. I love that it's a co-working value, and of course it's a co-working value. So collaboration means kind of several different things to me, but at the core of it, it really means the sharing of ideas and the ability to share those ideas in an open and inviting way, and in an open and inviting space. And one of the, kind of my favorite co-working moments, I guess you could say, is that moment where, you see 3 or 4 different members or a group of members who, are individuals in the space, but they have come together to work on either a problem that one of the members is trying to solve or a project, all of them together. And I just find that so exciting because, we've created that container. We haven't prescribed anything to that container, but we have created this opportunity for people to come together and work together in that way. I also see collaboration as being between the business owner and the member. And I have racked my brain, and I really can't think of another business model that you're literally co-creating your product alongside your customer in the same way that co-working does. And, you can point to software, iterative software, or SaaS software as a model, but that's not in person. Software companies can pump out, software and then receive feedback and new feature requests, and then pump out the next version based on their customer requests. But it's not something that's on the daily in person in the way that it is in a co-working space. So you're really collaboratively creating your business model alongside your members. And if you're listening to this podcast and just starting out or just considering opening a co-working space, just know that some of the kind of most important things that you'll do or important mindsets that you'll have in co-working is flexibility, and being flexible, knowing that you're going to set your business model up is important, but also knowing that your business model might pivot a couple times along the way, depending on who your community is and how they show up and what they might need. And then I also love the aspect of collaboration with the larger community. So, for instance, in my town, the co-working space was started by the economic development director and the mayor of the town. And that meant that there was immediately opportunities for collaboration with the local city government, with the local university system. And that was a pretty exciting thing for us in the early days of our co-working space being in our town, because there wasn't a lot of that kind of collaboration happening at the time. And the city and the university didn't really like each other very much. And it was right after the financial crash of 2008. And so as the economy was rebuilding, that collaboration that we were able to develop between the city and the university and the co-working space became a foundation of what's now a thriving local economy. And then finally, I love the fact that the ethos of co-working is an ethos that I follow in general in life, which is, the rising tide lifts all boats. It's this idea of an abundance mindset. And I love that, you can walk into a co-working space and spot 5 different graphic designers, and they all have their own specialties. And they're not competing with each other. They're not in there. And maybe they are competing against some of the same, RFPs or bids that are out there. But in general, they're more likely to collaborate than they are to compete in a co-working space. And when you take that to the external relationships that co-working spaces can have with each other, I see that as a win-win for everybody, because the more that a co-working space, the multiple co-working spaces in town can collaborate, the more they have to offer their group of members, the more marketing opportunities they have. Just in general, if you've got the collaboration inside the space, having that collaboration be how you operate, and the idea of co-opetition being how you operate within the external co-working community is just as valuable.
There's I think this. I get the feeling, because we've both been in conversations where people are talking about alliances. And certainly here in London, like in the last year, the London Co-working Assembly has, there's a few of us that have been trying for ages to get people together, and suddenly everyone, particularly in independent co-working spaces, whether they're independent on one-off spaces or independent, I own 3 or 4 spaces, are starting to want to be with each other, which is, I don't know what it is or whether it's just a few people around us, but the openness to collaboration is moving fast. Is there anything you particularly like us to draw attention to? Because I can put a link in the show notes to Women Who Co-work, which is epic, and I've watched that grow. It's like 2 years now, or is it less than that?
We launched in April. We officially launched in April of 2017. So yeah, just a little over 2 years now.
So that's really important work. And where's the best place to find Iris online and get in touch with you and tap into your talents?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Iris Kavanagh, and Kavanagh is spelled Kavanagh. And you can also find me online at coworkingconsultant.co.
Brilliant. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Speech impediment. Sorry. Thank you very much for your time today. I really, I know I've got to let people know that it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon here in London, and it's, what time is it where you are?
6:57 a.m.
Look at that commitment to the cause. Okay. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. Go to coalescent.com to sign up for email list, get in touch with all our other shows. And we're going through a little bit of a rebirth at the moment, because lots happened for everyone who works on this podcast project. And we just had to step away from the package, as we say, and now we're all getting back into the package. So be patient with us, and thank you for your loyalty over the years. Thank you very much, everyone. Be careful out there. It is a jungle. This podcast is brought to you by Social Bee. Stop wasting time on social media and get back to building your business. To take your free 14-day test drive with no card required, head to coalescentnetwork.com/social bee. Check the link in the show notes.